The latest Battle for Azeroth alpha build began a storyline which is set to begin a major plotline in the next World of Warcraft expansion. This video contains major lore spoilers for the Horde. So, last night I created a video on the scenarios for the Horde and the Alliance in terms of the Battle of Lordaeron. And at the end of it, from the Alliance point of view, there were a few bugs and glitches. From the Alliance point of view, it looked very much like we'd killed off Saurfang. From the Horde point of view, it looked like the same thing. Saurfang was kneeling on the ground, his body broken. Sylvanas said as much and abandoned him because they had a major disagreement. Now, the disagreement centred around this. When it came to the Battle of Lordaeron, to begin with, mostly traditional warfare tactics were used. But of course, the Forsaken being as they are, Sylvanas being as they are, she wasn't going to give up Lordaeron easily. If there was anything she could do to hold on to it, then she was going to do that. And indeed, that's exactly what she did. She set up Blight. She set up Plague Throwers and Blight canisters in order to try and destroy the advancing Alliance army. Saurfang, who went missing for a certain part of the scenario, was not happy at this and said as much. Sylvanas dismissed him, saying that anyone who wasn't prepared to do everything that they could to save the Horde was not worth having in the Horde. And it left it at that. She taunted him as she left, saying that maybe she'll raise his dead body up again, or maybe he'd be able to talk to his son. And off she went, evacuated Lordaeron. Now, it was difficult to sort of tell that, because immediately after the Horde scenario finishes, Horde players will go into a second scenario. Let's hope that that's not going to be an accusation of Horde bias again, because the Alliance do not get a similar scenario to do. This scenario involves being brought before Sylvanas. We don't know the full details of this. Remember, certain amounts of the storytelling are told within cinematics. Those cinematics are not within the alpha. They don't put them in there because they don't want any spoilers. We will see them for the first time on the 14th of August when this expansion goes live, and not before. But from the gist of everything when we're on the quest, you're being sent to Stormwind to break out an important prisoner. You don't really know any more than that. So off you go to Stormwind with a crack squad and you break into the Stormwind stockades. Strangely enough, it appears the way to do this is to simply open an unguarded wooden hatch and slip right in. So anyway, you go in through the Stormwind stockade and you come across a cell, and in it is Saurfang. Now, this is actually news to the people there, it seems. It actually seems that from the Horde point of view, you did think Saurfang had been killed, but not so. Now, the other thing to note is here, at this point you sort of think, oh, we're sent to rescue Saurfang, but that is not the case. And even Saurfang knows that that is not the case. You've not been sent to rescue him. He even tells you the person you've been sent to rescue is further down the hall. Now, that person, just to cut a long story short, because it's not a part of this story, is your lead into joining with the Zandalari trolls, which is not an easy thing to begin with, but you basically rescue a princess, the daughter of the Zandalar king. Now, on to Saurfang's story. You can still rescue him, of course. I mean, you're still there. It's like, you know, do you want to come with us, mate? His answer is a flat no. He says he refuses to rejoin Sylvanas's Horde. Now, this is immediately set up for another coup situation. Apart from anything else, although we don't yet know the full reason why Vol'jin made Sylvanas the next war chief, we are likely to find that out in BFA. Certainly the implication is, but we don't know any more than that. But whatever it is, does it really sit right with a lot of Horde players that Sylvanas is the war chief? It doesn't with me. I mean, I'm not a Horde player, but I think there's a lot of people it doesn't as well. So a lot of people will be champing at the bit. Saurfang, after all, is what you would call a traditional Orc war chief. He's a very well-respected leader, Loktar, Agar, all the rest of it, you know, the honourable way of fighting. And you would think the other faction, or race leaders within that faction, would accept him as war chief with a lot less suspicion than Sylvanas. But are they simply going to do another Siege of Orgrimmar type thing like with Garrosh? No, there are a number of differences. And also, it would be a dreadful lack of creativity to just dust off the same story. So let's look at a few things. So some of these differences are, first of all, there was not shock horror from the rest of the races within the Horde or the leaders of those races. There was even a Tauren spreading the blight. It wasn't just, although it was largely Forsaken, it wasn't exclusively that. The Blood Elves didn't seem to have a major problem with it either. There were no voices of dissent about Sylvanas' tactics other than from Saurfang, although you can of course assume a slight concern on the part of the Tauren and potentially the Trolls as well. Now, one major issue for MMOs in terms of PvP, just to slightly go off on a tangent, is that two factions just don't work. We know that, you know, when you get an imbalance of factions, it just doesn't really work. So part of my brain went, is this a way of splitting the game into three factions? There's plenty of races to do that. Is Saurfang going to form off a breakaway traditional Horde? Are we going to end up with three factions here? I don't think so. It doesn't make sense for a game that only pays lip service to PvP. A game that, although it keeps marching on, and far be it from me to say it's nearing its end, nonetheless, how long can it realistically have? And also, would people really accept this? Again, you'd be talking about people in the same guild and who were in the same faction having to change the races they could play. So, no, I think we can dismiss that one. I don't think it's a way of doing that. So then we look for the traditional challenge. Is Saurfang going to challenge Sylvanas to become war chief? You would certainly think this is going to be a major storyline through it, trying to gather support and trying to oust Sylvanas. He's only said he won't rejoin her Horde. He's surely not just going to abandon the Horde in general. So then you ask yourself, okay, so in this situation, would they actually kill off Sylvanas? Is she too big a character to be killed off? I think she is. And obviously there's all this issue with in terms of how many times she could be killed anyway. Not an easy thing to kill her off. Certainly not with a straightforward challenge. Would Sylvanas ever step back as war chief if challenged by Saurfang? This may be possible. At the moment you'd struggle to see it. Certainly if he just brings a show of force against her, she's not going to go, do you know what, I didn't want to be war chief anyway, and step back into the shadows. She's really gung-ho now. She's really changed into this protector of the Horde. She's taken it upon herself. She's used a lot of phrases in the Siege of Lordaeron which suggested that she's really prepared to do anything to save the Horde. Not just her own people, not just the Forsaken, the Horde as a whole. So she's not just going to step back if she feels that a weaker leader is simply going to take her place. But is there a scenario possible whereby Saurfang becomes war chief and Sylvanas does just step back? I can actually see that being a thing. But what is definitely the case, and it is very difficult to predict how this is going to go, is that Saurfang is going to be in the game and he's going to be working currently outside the Horde. There are bound to be Horde-specific quest lines related to him. We haven't come across any yet. In terms of doing the quests in the alpha, we haven't come across any. So he's likely to disappear, I would suggest, for a patch or two. Maybe there could even be a whole raid tier based around this. They did talk about faction-specific bosses. Because then the other question asks itself, let's say he were to challenge Sylvanas. I mean, there are one of three outcomes. I suppose technically one of four outcomes. One, Saurfang kills Sylvanas off. I don't think that's going to happen. Two, Sylvanas simply backs down and says, okay, you can be war chief. I don't think it's going to be as simple as that, but I can see a route to that. Three, Sylvanas kills off Saurfang. Is there any benefit in going through a whole storyline just to kill off Saurfang at the end of the expansion as opposed to at the beginning? Maybe if it's interesting enough. Is it the sort of thing that's likely to happen? I sort of suspect not. Or four, that eventually Saurfang backs down and rejoins the Horde. that's almost certainly not going to happen because, again, you know, too honourable would rather die than do that. So that's where we are at the moment, and without going into wild speculation, that's where we're going to leave it. But of course, I'm sure you've got ideas yourself, especially those Horde players who will have gone through far more storylines with Saurfang than I will have done, having only played Horde now and then. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, share with other people who might also be interested, and until next time, I'll see you later.